I came to Bangalore 3 days ago to host an event at the Atlassian office. A beautiful build-a-thon. I had too much fun. You see, this is my first trip back to the city since I moved to Goa on the 1st of April 2026. And I just can't explain it to you in words how disoriented I'm feeling this time. I've lived in Bangalore for 5 years before this. I've lived in Mumbai for 35 years before this. I'm a big city boy who's lived in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, all the big cities. I've never lived in a smaller, quieter place. And a big part of my disorientation on this trip is the shocking decibel level of this city. It's so noisy. Bangalore used to be this quaint, idyllic village like retirement garden, a lake paradise. Today, the hustle and bustle of this Silicon Valley is overwhelming. It wouldn't have affected me had I just been continuously living here. But Goa changed that. I moved here in September 2019, back then for a job, obviously, because I was heading communications at Xiaomi, which was the number one consumer tech brand back then. And I was only too happy. I was frustrated with Mumbai, the sound, the population density, the 24/7 frantic pace. I was sick and tired of it. And Bangalore offered great respite. But you see, everything is relative. Bangalore felt great. I conducted yoga in Kavan Park, ran my weekenders community, took long walks in Lal Bagh, spotted birds, photographed owls, discovered urban forests, make videos about it, and it went viral on Instagram Reels. You see, in comparison to Mumbai, Bangalore felt extremely green with big, expansive trees lining the roads and beautiful pink and yellow flowers dotting the entire city. Then I moved to Goa on the 1st of April. And Goa has such an abundance of raw, non manicured nature, and above everything, that quietude. I live in Panji, which is city center, and still I don't hear a single car or bike honking. Just 3.5 weeks of living there has, in a way, reset my ears, my brain, and what audio signal and decibel level feel normal to me. I had no idea how overwhelming Bangalore was until I came 3 days ago on this work trip. I was constantly restless. I was snapping. I was getting angry at the smallest of things. It was only when I sat down for my weekly Saturday morning Vipassana meditation at Yogistan in Indiranagar. This used to be my routine when I lived here. That's when I realized, in all the Shanti, that finally my heartbeat stabilized. The constant assault of high decibel city life here was incompatible with my mental, physical, emotional state. I was almost in disbelief that just 3 or 4 weeks of life in Goa had reset this. So, of course, I geeked out. I turned to two sources. First, classical music. I'm a huge fan of it, Western and Indian. I also discovered a brand new app on iPhone called Apple Music Classical, which is separate from the music app. There, listening to Max Richter's composition of Vivaldi's Four Seasons Spring brought me a strange sense of calm. Listening to Yo-Yo Ma's prelude from Bach's first cello suite brought me a sense of stability. Listening to Kishorita Yamonkar, Pandit Bhimsen Joshi's Hindustani classical vocals finally helped me feel at home. Second, I wrote a newsletter, which is what I'm reading out. This was a deep dive in the relationship between sound, noise, music, and our state of mind. The ancient science of Nada Shastra, the modern world of sound healing, commercial music, and orchestras. Here's what I geeked out on. You see, there's a Vedic claim, ancient, uncompromising, that goes like this: Nada Brahma. The world is sound. Not the world contains sound, not the world is filled with sound. The world is sound. Nad is Brahma, Brahmanda. Sound is not what creation produces. Sound is what creation is made of. The vibration came first, and matter, light, body, mind, all of it settled out of the vibration like minerals out of a moving river. For most of my life, I thought this was just relative, metaphorical, poetic. But last Saturday at Yogistan, I started to wonder if it actually might be physics. The ancients in our tradition were not the only ones to say it. In the 6th century BCE, Pythagoras, who we now remember mostly for the right angle theorem and terror that it was in school, he was primarily a metaphysician of sound. The story, possibly apocryphal but useful, goes that he walked past a blacksmith shop and noticed that hammers of different weights produce different tones, and the tones, they bore mathematical relationships to one another. From this he derived the harmonic series and the doctrine of musica universalis, the music of the spheres. The planets in their orbits, he argued, produced an inaudible cosmic chord, and human music, when done well, was a smaller, faithful echo of that larger order. Pythagoras and the rishis would have agreed on this fundamental claim. The universe is, at base, vibration. Everything else is harmony or dissonance of that vibration. Patanjali, somewhere in the centuries before the Common Era, distilled it to a single sutra, Tasya Vachakaha Pranavaha. Yoga Sutra 1.27. His expression is the syllable Om. Not represents, is. Om is not a label for the divine, it is the divine in its sonic form. Chant it for long enough and the chant stops being an act and starts being a place of peace and sanity. Within yoga itself, this opens into a precise tradition called Nada Yoga, the yoga of sound, which makes a careful distinction. There is ahat sound, struck sound, the kind of tabla or the kind a Bangalore horn makes. And then there is anahat sound, unstruck sound, the sound that is heard only in deep meditation, where the ahat recedes far enough from something which below it becomes audible. Anahat is the same word the tradition uses for the heart chakra, anahat chakra. The ancient understanding was that the heart, properly attended to, hears music that did not have to be played. Heart is placeholder for the mind, it's not the actual organ. This is what my hour of Vipassana at Yogistan returned me to. Not just silence, sound, internal, that did not have to be played. Anahat. If the ancients were right that sound is the substrate, then the difference between the music that heals and the music that hurts cannot be aesthetic. It has to be structural, it has to be in the ratios. Hindustani classical understood this 5,000 years ago, before frequency analysis by modern labs. The Raga time theory, which Pandit Bhimsen Joshi or Kishoritai Amonkar, they lived with. That theory holds that each rag belongs to a specific prahar of the day or night, a 3-hour window. Bhairav is sung at dawn, Yaman at dusk, Bhairavi at the very edge of morning, Marva in the late afternoon, Malkons at the dead of night. To sing a rag out of its time in this tradition is a small error against nature, like watering a plant at the wrong hour. The reason the tradition says is that the body has its own clock, and certain combinations of notes resonate with certain states of the autonomic nervous system. Modern chronobiology is very slowly, in lab settings, beginning to find that this might be true. Vagal tone, heart rate variability, cortisol, melatonin all move with the day, and musical interventions land differently depending on when they are delivered. What Bhimsen Joshi knew with his lungs, modern day labs are only now learning with their sensors. When I played Bhimsen Joshi ji on Saturday morning, my body did not relax because the music was familiar or that I liked it. My body also relaxed because on some level it understood, without my knowledge or consent, that the rag was timed to the body it was being played to. Science, sonic science. The Western tradition encodes the same wisdom less explicitly, but no less carefully. Bach's Goldberg variations by tradition were composed for Count Hermann Karl von Kesselring, who could not sleep and asked his court harpsichordist Johann Gottlieb Goldberg to play him into rest. The story may be partly legend, but the structure is not. The variations are a 30-part cycle of mathematical permutations on a single theme, returning at the end to the very area with which they began. The piece, in other words, is a circle. Listening to it, the brain is given something it does not get all day, a journey that comes home. In 2015, the contemporary composer Max Richter took this logic to its absolute extreme. His piece, called Sleep, is 8 hours long, designed to be listened to while sleeping. He composed it in consultation with the neuroscientist David Eagleman, threading the work to the architecture of sleep cycles. Performances of Sleep are held overnight in concert halls converted into dormitories, the audience in beds. Richter's recomposition of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, the same piece I was listening to last week, is a different kind of remedy. He discards roughly 3/4 of Vivaldi's notes and lets the remaining quarter breathe. Less sound, more listening, more feeling. That Vivaldi's original is being played at all is itself a small miracle. The Four Seasons, composed by Vivaldi in 1725, fell into obscurity for 2 centuries and was rediscovered only in the 1920s. Bach's 6 suites for solo cello vanished into manuscript libraries until Pablo Casals, aged 13, found a battered copy of the score in a second-hand shop in Barcelona in 1890 and spent the next 12 years practicing them privately before he dared to perform them in public. The cello pieces my body recognized existed for 150 years as silence inside paper. Yo-Yo Ma did not write them, he returned them. While the West was composing this medicine, it was also in parallel manufacturing the disease. In 1859, in Notes on Nursing, Florence Nightingale wrote one of the sharpest sentences ever written about sound. Unnecessary noise is the most cruel absence of care which can be inflicted either on the sick or the well. She meant it literally. She had watched soldiers die from infections she could not stop, and she had also watched them not heal in rooms that would not let them rest. A century and a half later, the World Health Organization's Environmental Noise Guidelines for the European region, updated in 2018, placed the threshold at roughly 53 decibels of road traffic noise during the day before measurable cardiovascular harm begins to show up at population scale. Above that threshold, the data links chronic exposure to ischemic heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, sleep disturbance, cognitive impairment in children, and a measurable rise in dementia risk in older adults. The WHO did not invent these findings. They aggregated decades of European cohort studies that had been quietly accumulating since the 1980s. Bangalore traffic averages, depending on which agency you trust, somewhere between 75 and 90 decibels at major junctions during peak hours. That's not a statistic. That is 20,000 small invisible insults per day to a heart that thinks it is just trying to cross the road. The body knows, it always knew. It just stopped being asked and being considered of. The Canadian composer R. Murray Schafer was the first person in the modern English-speaking world to give this knowing a vocabulary. In the Soundscape, Our Sonic Environment and the Tuning of the World, published in 1977, he argued, quietly and with care, that the audible environment was as much an ecosystem as the visible one, and that we were destroying it without noticing because there was no word for what we were destroying. He gave us that word, soundscape. Around the same time, the American composer Pauline Oliveros developed a practice she called deep listening. In 1988, she descended with a tape recorder into an underground cistern at Fort Worden in Washington state, a chamber with a 45-second reverberation, and emerged with the conviction that the discipline of listening, properly practiced, was a form of prayer. Nada Shastra. Patanjali, in the second chapter of his sutras, calls a version of this pratyahar, the deliberate withdrawal of the senses, in which sound is not silenced but is allowed to settle. Schaeffer and Oliveros, neither of them yogis, arrived at the same threshold from different doors. The unstruck sound is not somewhere else. It is right here, underneath the struck, anahat. I think this is why 3 weeks in Goa reset something I did not even know was broken. Goa is not silent. There are crows, there are birds, the call to prayer, the sound of someone's mother calling someone in for lunch, and the bicycle horn of the poder, the baker bringing fresh bread and pav. But it is unmanicured sound, sound that has somewhere to go, sound that is not being made to sell anything to anyone. Bangalore sound feels transactional, layered, urgent. Almost all of it is a cacophony of notifications. Goa's sound is the anahat showing through. For anyone who wants to keep going on this, I would highly recommend Daniel Levitin's This Is Your Brain on Music. Levitin, a McGill neuroscientist who used to produce records for Steely Dan and Stevie Wonder before he became a researcher, lays out, in plain English, by specific intervals, do specific things to the brain. Why we cry at certain chord changes in music, why the body remembers melodies it has not heard in 20 years. It is the closest thing in the modern Western canon to a working manual for what the rishis called Nad Yoga. I'm recording this on Sunday night from my hotel room in Bengaluru with windows closed so you can hear my audio. I fly back to Panji in a couple of days. I don't know what to do about the disorientation, except the fact that I will trust my body and I will trust my ears. It already knows and it has remembered, and its knowing is older than this city's traffic by tens of thousands of years. The world is sound. The work this week is to be quiet enough to hear it. Thank you so much for watching and for listening.